Thank you for joining us today. My name is Susan Evans, and I am honored to welcome you to today's webinar with Kensington Seniors Living's expert on nutrition. I have worked with Annie Fenn on cooking demonstrations and book signings. I continue to be impressed with her solid knowledge in nutrition and commitment in helping end Alzheimer's through diet. Thank you, Kensington, for supporting these powerful educational events for our aging community. I was introduced to Kensington in 2015. Our family made the difficult decision to move my father to Kensington in Northern California. He was living with Alzheimer's disease, and it was greatly impacting my mother's health, and I did not want to lose both my parents to this dreadful disease. My life pivoted and did a 180 from being a recent empty nester to dedicating my efforts to education and connecting the Alzheimer's community. Annie Fenn has experienced the same dreadful disease with her mother and also took a U-turn in her career to join the battle. Thank you, Annie. Kensington focuses on relationship-based care, care built on the foundation of their promise to love and care for your family as they do their own. It is programs such you are attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiving journey to hear from expert professionals on keeping us current with the latest advances in care, management, and treatment of conditions that affect seniors and their families. Kensington is truly privileged to support care partners and professionals from coast to coast. A copy of today's webinar will be delivered to your inbox with links to connect you to Annie Fenn and a special offer to join her club. Please share the webinar with friends and family. At the end of the program, we will have a conversation with questions submitted at registration and open up to a live Q&A. Please join me in welcoming Annie Fenn. Annie, can you join us?
Hi.
I misspoke when I was introducing you. I said it's Annie Fenn's Brain Health Kitchen newsletter that I'm going to encourage everyone to subscribe to, that you'll be receiving a link at follow-up. I read your newsletter from beginning to end every time. It is filled with great recipes, valuable information, and really up to date on what's going on, not just in brain health, but in overall health. So thank you for that.
Aw, thank you. Thanks everyone for having me. It's such a pleasure to be back at Kensington Senior Living. And Susan, it's so good to see you. It's been a while. And today's program, I hope, is going to be really informative and really fun. And I also have a few recipes that I want to demonstrate for you.
I'm going to let Annie share with you a few words about herself, and then I'm going to come back after she finishes up her discussion on what's good for the heart is good for the head. I'll see you in a bit.
All right. Thanks, Susan. Well, as Susan mentioned, I'm actually a physician. I am an obstetrician gynecologist who was in practice for over 20 years. And at that point, I decided to make a shift in my career and I went to culinary school. I've always been a cook, I've always loved making healthy food, but I really felt like one of the root causes to a lot of the patients that I was seeing was that people just weren't following a healthy lifestyle and they weren't eating adequate nutrition. So I went to culinary school and I came back and I started teaching healthy cooking in my community. Now, around the time that this was happening, my mom was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which some of you may recognize as an early stage of Alzheimer's disease. So when my mom was diagnosed, I did a deep dive into all the literature in the scientific community about, how do you slow the process down when someone is diagnosed early? And that's how the Brain Health Kitchen was born. I found an incredible amount of scientific data, and it's still growing, back in 2015 to say that what we eat and how we live our lives are very important for aging with a healthy brain. So I founded the Brain Health Kitchen in 2015, right here in my kitchen with a bunch of motivated, healthy aging people. And it has grown into a newsletter community. It's also a book, which we'll be cooking a couple recipes from the book, the Brain Health Kitchen book, Preventing Alzheimer's Through Food, which came out last year. And it's also grown into a program where I take people on educational vacations all around the world, teach them about healthy cooking, healthy living, and basically all the things that we can do to protect our brains as we age. So that's a little bit about me. I have a program for you tonight about what's good for your heart is good for your head. And I'm going to start with my slides. Oh, and I think Susan mentioned we have time at the end for questions. So whatever questions you have, please do jot them down and we'll have a discussion afterwards. Okay. Everyone okay with my slides? We're good. Okay. Okay. So what's good for your heart is good for your head. And I know you've probably heard that what's good for your heart is good for your brain. It's a common saying in the brain health world. In the next couple of minutes, I want to show you exactly what that means. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the science behind it and how the food relates to that as well. So the heart-brain connection. We're going to talk a little bit about Alzheimer's. I call it Alzheimer's 101. What's going on in the brain? What does it have to do with your cardiovascular system? We're going to talk about the 5 heart health risk factors, some updated dementia risk factors that everyone needs to know. We'll talk about what are brain-friendly fats and how to make healthy swaps in your meals for your heart and your brain. And I'm going to show you how to make a couple easy recipes using these swaps for making nut milk and nut cream at home. So I know we're all familiar with the term dementia. We all know what this is, right? But dementia is actually an umbrella term of that means having cognitive impairment and disease-related cognitive impairment. But under that umbrella, there's different types of dementia. Now, Alzheimer's is what everyone talks about, probably because it's the most common type of dementia. 80% of all people living with dementia have Alzheimer's. But there's this other type of dementia that's also very common. It's called vascular dementia. And the incidence is variable depending on what you read. It could be 10%, it could be 25%. And one study, if you look at my slide here, they looked at the brains of people who had presumed to have Alzheimer's. 50% of those people also had vascular dementia. Now, vascular dementia has to do with the health of your blood vessels. And the health of your blood vessels is paramount to age with a healthy brain. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then there's other types of dementias. You can get dementia from Parkinson's, Lewy body, FTD, Huntington's chorea. All of these things are also under the umbrella of dementia. But most experts in brain health aren't really thinking of Alzheimer's as one thing anymore. There are many paths to Alzheimer's disease. There are combinations of different dementias. And vascular health is always in the background. It's always in the back of our minds, and it's something we need to pay attention to. And this is just a really easy schematic of a healthy brain. I mean, just look at the blood supply to the brain. How could this not be an important aspect? When people have a compromise or an unhealthy cardiovascular system, it really reaches to these tiny blood vessels that supply the brain, and that causes reduced blood flow to the brain, which can cause damage to certain areas. If Alzheimer's is already present or starting to develop, it can really accelerate that process. Now, you might have heard that Alzheimer's disease starts at least 20 years before the first symptoms. And it's true. It's true. The things that happen in our brain that ultimately become diagnosed as Alzheimer's start really in early adulthood and midlife. So midlife, the ages between 45 and 65, are a really important time frame for people to think about what they're eating, what their lifestyle habits are, because we know that this group of midlife people can actually change the trajectory of their brain health by paying attention to certain things. So what are the big risk factors for heart disease? Well, high blood pressure is one. Getting back to midlife, if you have elevated blood pressure at midlife, it does increase your risk of getting Alzheimer's later. Not so much with older adults, people over the age of 65. High blood pressure in that age group has different problems, but it doesn't create Alzheimer's like it does in midlife people. High cholesterol, we know it's not good to have high cholesterol, especially LDL cholesterol. We now know that it's a specific risk factor for both heart disease and brain diseases. Diabetes, people with diabetes also have an increased risk of heart disease, having an above ideal body weight, and tobacco use. Now, these are the big 5. What are the risk factors for dementia? Well, this has actually been updated very recently by the Lancet Commission. The Lancet Commission is a body of experts who convene every 3 or 4 years to talk about what are the modifiable risk factors for dementia. What are the things that we can change? What are the things that are like the low-hanging fruit that doctors need to be talking about, that people need to be aware of? And in this latest paper that they put out just a couple months ago, they added two new risk factors. One of them is LDL cholesterol. The higher your LDL, the greater your risk of dementia and possibly Alzheimer's disease. They also add vision loss as one of these modifiable risk factors. Now, the take-home message from this, and I know this graph is a little bit small, so it's hard to see, but all of these midlife risk factors in this middle yellow bubble, all of these are also the same risk factors for heart disease. Things like elevated cholesterol, diabetes, hypertension, being sedentary or not getting enough exercise, tobacco use, and excessive alcohol use. All of these are also risk factors for heart disease. Okay, so we're going to talk about dietary fat. Dietary fat is central to this whole discussion of heart health and brain health and nutrition and everything. I just made this graphic for a newsletter that I wrote earlier this month. We were talking about omega-3 fatty acids. The omega-3s come from these foods down here. But this is the big picture of dietary fat. Now, we know that there are two basic types of fat. There are the unsaturated fats and the saturated ones. Easy, right? Under the unsaturated fats, there are monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. Okay? Easy, right? Under the polyunsaturated fats, this is where the omega-3 fatty acids are. Omega-3s are very important for brain health. They're very important for heart health as well. And those are called DHA, EPA, and ALA. So over here under saturated fat foods, everyone's probably aware that certain foods have more saturated fat than others. These include meat, chicken, coconut oil, butter, cheese, a lot of dairy products, especially a lot of processed dairy products. And the man-made saturated fat products are probably the absolute worst for your health. These are trans fats, man-made fats that go into processed food and also margarine. Okay, so what is the composition of a brain healthy diet? Well, what we know from, these decades and decades of study so far is that a brain healthy diet contains mostly these fats and very little of these fats. So you need saturated fats, but you only need about 5% of them in your diet or less. Okay. Now, the typical American diet consumes probably 55% of the calories from ultra processed food. And the fat composition of the typical American diet is somewhere around 60% saturated fat. So when we talk about heart health and brain health, we're asking people to sort of flip the fat content of their diet. This is one of the most important things you can do to age with a healthy heart and a healthy brain. Now, for monounsaturated fats, these are the fats we get from nuts and seeds, avocado, olives, olive oil. We like these to make up 80% of a brain healthy diet. The polyunsaturated fats you get from fish and seafood and some cooking oils, that is about 15%. So 80% mono, 15% poly, and less than 5% saturated fats. This is what we think is the perfect composition of a brain healthy diet when it comes to fat. Now, all the studies that we have that we'll be talking about a little later, the Mediterranean diet studies, the Mind diet study, the Green Med diet, there are diets looking at whole food plant-based eating, like Dr. Dean Ornish's most recent study. All of these have one thing in common. They are limiting foods that are processed and high in saturated fats. And in my book, I have guidelines for the 10 brain healthy food groups and 6 foods to limit or avoid. But you can see right here how ultra-processed foods, fast and fried foods, dairy, pastries and sweets, sweetened and artificially sweetened drinks, and now alcohol, we know, are foods that should be limited or avoided. Most of these, it centers around their saturated fat content. So what do you do instead? Well, I can tell you that your food is going to be just as delicious and just as satiating if you take a few changes in your diet. For example, think about your snack cupboard. Instead of having processed foods like, say, pretzels or certain crackers or chips or things like that. The best thing to snack on would be nuts, nut butters, dates, dark chocolate, good quality bars, seeds. All of these things can be rich in monounsaturated fats. Straight from the cardiology literature, we know that eating a handful of nuts a day, which is about a quarter cup, just a small handful of nuts a day, reduces people's risk of heart attack and stroke by about 20%. And it does the same thing for brain health. That's why nuts and now seeds are considered brain healthy food groups. They got the monounsaturated fats, they give you a good dose of protein. And very importantly, when you're snacking on nuts and seeds or nut butters and things like that, instead of, say, a candy bar or a processed food, then you're flipping that fat profile in your diet. It's all about that. Another healthy swap, dairy milk for plant-based milk. Now, there's a lot we could get into here because it gets complicated. Not all dairy milk is bad, certainly. Not all plant-based milk is good. A lot of it is highly processed and has added sugar and flavorings and binders and things that I really don't want people to consume on a regular basis. But in general, if you can take foods like cow's milk, whole milk, that's high in saturated fat, and replace it with something that's lower in saturated fat, like skim milk or low-fat milk or non-fat milk, or a plant-based milk that also gives you something else, like soy milk, gives you isoflavones and flavonoids, which are really good for your heart and your brain, then that's a win for your heart and your brain. Cheese. The cheese requirements for a brain healthy diet are actually quite low. And that's sad to say as a cheese lover that, snacking on cheese is not really a good thing to do anymore if you're concerned about your heart and your brain. So instead of cheese, we'd like to use lots of alternatives. And when you do eat cheese, choose lower fat cheeses like feta, pecorino, Parmigiano Reggiano. These really good artisanal cheeses are lower in fat, high in flavor, so you get away with using less. But there are also some really easy nut-based cheeses, which do double duty by giving you a serving of nuts and also reducing the saturated fat in your diet. And I have a couple recipes in my book about that, and we can talk about that later if you're curious. Now, here's a big one. This one is really important. Swapping butter, lard, and coconut oil for extra virgin olive oil. Now, extra virgin olive oil is one of the 10 brain healthy food groups, and it's different than all cooking oils. Extra virgin olive oil is at the cornerstone of the Mediterranean diet and also the MIND diet, two diets we know that are brain protective. And the reason it's different is, remember that fat profile we talked about? 80% monounsaturated fat, 15% poly, less than 5% saturated. That's exactly the fat profile of extra virgin olive oil. So it gives the diet the fats that are needed in the right ratio. Plus, something that extra virgin olive oil has that no other cooking oils have is polyphenols. Polyphenols are antioxidants that get into the bloodstream, they pass the blood-brain barrier, and they have certain functions in the brain to keep the brain healthy and young. So extra virgin olive oil, swapping in for these high fat foods, has been shown to have an incredible impact on health. And I'll show you that in the next slide. Alcohol, the latest data on alcohol shows that we shouldn't be drinking as much as we have in the past, or rather, the moderate drinking that has always thought to be good for the heart and maybe the brain is it's no longer true. Moderate drinking is defined as 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men. And now it's been shown that light drinking is really preferable. Light drinking is defined as 0 to 4 drinks a week. Now, meat and chicken, you don't need to be completely vegetarian or vegan to have a brain healthy diet, but it is good to reduce the portion size of meat and chicken and also choose high quality, grass-fed, sustainable, ethically sourced meats. High quality meats provide protein. They're really important for a brain healthy diet. Everybody needs to get protein in their diet to age with a healthy brain. But choosing better quality products, eating less of them, and really having a predominantly plant-based diet is the best way for a healthy brain. Now, what is the impact of swapping out these fat foods? This study came out of the Journal of American College of Cardiology a couple of years ago. There's been many, many studies on this, but I really like this one because it has a practical application. If you take 1 teaspoon of butter, mayonnaise, or dairy fats, these high saturated fat foods, and replace it with extra virgin olive oil, it has been shown to lower your risk from cardiovascular disease, cancer, and Alzheimer's disease incredibly across the board. Now, just a half a tablespoon of this swap lowers your mortality from any cause by 34%. If you dig into the details of this paper and they look at just the deaths from Alzheimer's disease, this one little swap in your kitchen, which I might add is really delicious and easy to do, reduces the risk of dying from a neurodegenerative disease, including Alzheimer's, by 29%. So we're talking about slashing risk in thirds just by having this one really easy swap in your kitchen. I'm going to close with sort of a roundup of the brain healthy food groups. This is the brain health kitchen food pyramid that's in my book. And each rung of this ladder on this pyramid is a different food group. And here you can see that the foods that should be eaten more plentifully in a brain healthy and heart healthy diet are mostly the plant-based ones. These are berries, leafy greens, vegetables, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, whole grains. Here we have fish and seafood, which is an important source of omega-3 fatty acids. Like we talked about, those polyunsaturated fats. I'm adding fermented food here. And here in this yellow box, this is chicken, meat, and eggs. Certainly can be included in a brain healthy diet, but a lot less than what has been seen in the standard American diet. Up here, I have sweets because I don't really want to have a diet that doesn't have, the cookies and cakes and things that I love. But I have adapted almost all of my recipes to bake with olive oil instead of butter. And that is a really good swap for your brain. It's really important in a brain healthy diet to have it low in saturated fats, high in the right fats, also high in fiber, rich in antioxidants, low in added salt.
I had the pleasure of actually cooking with Dr. Fenn, and she made the most awesome olive oil cake that I didn't want to overindulge, but I was so excited that it was actually brain healthy. And I will say my hardest thing with the whole diet, the mind diet, is cheese. But you also have in your cookbook walnut parm. I am telling to our audience today, it's better than Parmesan cheese, and there's no cheese in it. You can use it on top of salads, on top of soups, on top of any type of stew or soup that you're doing. It's absolutely fantastic. So I love
Oh,
that.
Susan, yeah, there's a couple really easy things you can make if you have a blender or a food processor. Walnut parm is basically walnuts with garlic, miso paste, and nutritional yeast, a little bit of salt. And you just process it until it's crumbly, like grated Parmesan cheese. It's not meant to replace Parmesan cheese in your life. How could it? Parmesan cheese is an artisanal thing of its own, but boy, is it delicious in its own right. And if you have something like walnuts, which are so rich in these monounsaturated fatty acids and also polyphenols, swapping it in for cheese, that's just one of those win-wins.
But it's delicious. It's delicious. And I have another question for you that actually came up at an event you and I did. And people, look at that chart and look at, you need half a cup of nuts every day or seeds and don't have cheese and don't have alcohol and all that stuff. If I adhere to the mind diet, like what percentage? I mean, we all go off a diet, we all make an oopsie daisy, it's just getting back on that bus. What percentage of my life during my week or my month do I really need to focus on this to make it brain and heart healthy for me?
Well, this is such a good question because I think there's a misconception that if you want to have a brain healthy diet, you have to be perfect. You can't eat a candy bar. You can't have a hamburger or ever go for a fast food lunch. And that's really not the case. The way these studies were done, including the Mind Diet study out of Rush University, which looked at about 1,000 older adults who did not have dementia and looked at how closely they adhered to this brain healthy diet, which, by the way, slashed the risk by 53% with Alzheimer's after 4.5 years. But the way they tracked these people was what they ate on a weekly basis. Okay. They didn't have to score 100% on their dietary questionnaire every single week. But if they were scoring in the upper 25% of, the guidelines, then they had meaningful reductions in their Alzheimer's risk. So it's never any one food. I would love for people to get away from the idea of superfoods and instead think of food groups. It's never just one food. It's really the composition, what you eat most of the time. It's not what you ate when you went on vacation last month. It's not, what you ate at the kids' party at school. where they're serving pizza and, Lord knows what else. It's what you eat most of the time. So when you have control over your food, as you do in your home, in your kitchen, it does require a little bit of meal preparation, a little bit of cooking, easy meal prep. But it does require just being a little savvy, knowing the brain healthy food groups, and then giving yourself permission to indulge in the foods that you love. There are foods that I love that I wouldn't go without, even though they're not on my brain healthy list. But most of the time, I am eating a composition that looks like this.
And most of the time, I have a question for you. Um, from our audience. So vegetarian is best. Plant-based diet is obviously ideal, right? But we all have that 5% that we want the chicken and meat and all that stuff. So in 7 days in a week, how many is like 4 days a week good for veggie or 3 days a week? Like what would be simple for as a guideline for the audience?
So one really simple guideline is that when you go to a dinner party or you're at a restaurant or you're cooking for yourself, 3/4 of your plate should be plant foods. And this would be vegetables or a
Mm.
salad, whole grains, maybe it's rice, maybe it's whole grain pasta, nuts or seeds, maybe it's like some walnut parm that someone made for you or that you made yourself, beans or legumes, maybe it's lentils or some black beans. 3/4 of your plate should be plant foods. And then that other quarter, what we're talking about is just shifting the mentality of the American diet where meat has always been the center of the plate and it's a big portion of meat, right? But you can't achieve these brain healthy fat compositions, with that sort of a meat centric diet. So the meat is there if you want it, but it's a smaller portion and it is also buffered by all these other foods. In my guidelines, I recommend, trying to keep it under 4 servings of meat a week. I know that's a big change for some people. Some people are totally fine with it. They don't eat that much meat at all. Other people are eating meat every single day and every meal, and that probably needs to be adjusted. Fish and seafood has a really important role here. If you're lucky enough to live near a place that has high quality seafood, the more fish and seafood that you consume in this diet, you get more lean protein, you get more of those omega-3 fatty acids. It's a total win for your brain. And in my book, I go into the best seafood to eat, the best fish to eat, so you don't expose yourself to, excessive toxins. But in general, you want to have high protein foods at every meal, about 20 to 30 grams of protein at every meal. And you want to have this mix of mostly plants, punctuated by meat, chicken, eggs, if you like them.
I'm going to tell the audience that I feel really lucky that we've actually cooked together and done some cooking demonstrations. And the flavorful foods that you have that are plant-based are amazing. The cauliflower tacos, I'm just doing a shout out to the cauliflower tacos. And it's not complicated. And at first I thought cauliflower tacos with snap peas in it. Oh my gosh. I probably make it at least once a month. Once a month. So
Love that
delicious.
recipe. No, it's the whole thing with eating for brain health and cooking with brain health in mind. It has to be easy. It has to be doable. It has to fit your budget. It has to fit your life, the way you like to eat. We're not talking about a diet here. We're not talking about going on a diet in January and going off of it in February and being like, oh, I'm so glad that diet's over. It's about tailoring this, fitting it to the way you like to eat. Might make more sense if you grew up in an Asian American household, for example, to reach for different types of fruits and vegetables and fish that you don't see in this Mediterranean version. Just because I say Mediterranean a lot, it's just because our data comes from extensive study of the Mediterranean diet. But there are heritage diets that are African American, Latin American, Asian American, and the pyramids look just like this. It's just different foods. So fit means, how do you make this make sense for you? The food has to make sense for your food roots, honoring your ancestors, how you like to eat, all of those things. So it's a bit of a process, and I can walk you through it in the front part of my book. I walk you through the mindset. I walk you through how to get started. Usually not revamping your diet all in one go is recommended, but making small changes like that olive oil swap probably will be one of the first best things to do because it's got so much data to show that it really has a bang for its buck.
And really starting, I mean, you've helped guide me through, but starting in your pantry, and it's not expensive. I mean, I can mention, Trader Joe's and some of the other places that you can get really good, high quality, organic or not organic nuts and put those in your pantry and replace it with chips was really easy. But speaking of budget and olive oil, do I have to buy a certain olive oil or what are your thoughts on olive oil?
No, olive oil, it's really important to know what kind of olive oil to buy. And there are really good products at the grocery store, at all grocery stores. But the thing you need to know is that the kind you want is extra virgin olive oil. There may be other types. If you start looking at olive oil bottles, you notice some are pure olive oil, some are virgin olive oil, some are light olive oil. You don't want any of that. You want extra virgin olive oil. And you want to make sure when you look at the label, you have to turn around the bottle. Sometimes you have to look at underneath the bottle. You need to find a harvest date. So this is
Mm.
the date that the olives were pressed and harvested. Usually they're pressed immediately after harvest, the freshest. And so any olive oil worth your money, even if it's a grocery store brand that is inexpensive, will have that harvest date. Okay. Because those polyphenols I was telling you about in olive oil, they expire and they expire way before the best buy date. So you want to be careful about the olive oil that you buy. And another good tip is to make sure that it only has a single type of olive. You don't want to buy olive oil that's been pooled from many countries. You want it to be from one place, and that place should be very obvious on the bottle. Greece, Italy, Turkey, Tunisia, whatever. It should be very obvious. California has very stringent rules about bottling olive oil. And so if it says California on the label, that means the California Olive Oil Council gave it the two thumbs up.
That's really good advice. I never thought of looking at a label on the bottom. A couple questions just came in. If I must use a little fake butterish product, what is the least bad? And I think I could answer that for you, but I'm going to let you take that.
I would get away from having anything in your kitchen or, in your food life that is like a spreadable, creamy thing that you like to eat, like a fat that you're putting on food. I would just get away from those sorts of things like margarines, butter blends, even olive oil butter blends. I just would get away from that. They're designed to be hyper palatable, meaning they're designed for you to pile it on, because the fat is like just satiating. And even with olive oil, it's not like, the sky's the limit. There's a highly caloric food too. We want everyone to age at a healthy weight to have a healthy brain. So, the best dose for olive oil is like in European countries, the average person consumes a quarter cup of extra virgin olive oil a day. And in the United States, what would you guess would be the average consumption, Susan?
2 tablespoons.
Yeah, less than a teaspoon.
Oh,
We're not consuming very much olive oil in this country, and we're not consuming very good olive oil. It's fresher, where it comes from the source. In California, it may be different, of course. But that's just something to think about. And then these other spreads, these products that you buy, they just kind of get in the way. If you want to use butter, I would just use butter. I would use grass-fed butter, the highest quality you can afford.
unsalted.
I use unsalted. I usually buy unsalted butter because it's usually fresher.
And you can add your own flake salt.
Yeah, and I always have my own salt with baking. Yeah.
And Donald asked, he loves toast. What can you do olive oil on toast? Or if you want to not use butter, what do you think?
Give it a try. If you're a butter on toast person like I was and everyone else in my family, give it a try. Just put the butter aside for a while and just see if it's always on the counter, then it's so easy to smear it on everything. I mean, butter is delicious. And I have butter in my kitchen. I use it sometimes. But with olive oil, the flavor of the olive oil is really part of the joy of cooking with it and eating it. The flavors are very vibrant, very peppery. The more peppery the olive oil, the more polyphenols it has. And sometimes that becomes an acquired taste. If you like your olive oil very mild, that's fine, but maybe work up to some more flavorful olive oils. They're gonna have more of those brain healthy polyphenols. But just give it a try. When my kids were in high school, I got rid of the butter on the kitchen counter. I always had good bread and olive oil though. They would come home from soccer practice and they'd be dipping bread in olive oil. And I
Oh,
thought,
it's
oh,
so good. Oh,
that's a
it's so
pretty
good.
that's a
And
good
our
better
Arlene
than
just
a bag of
said,
fish.
yeah, Arlene just said, how about avocado on toast? And that's my favorite thing. A little avocado on your toast with a little pumpkin seeds is the
That
best. And you can drizzle olive oil on that.
Yeah, avocado is fantastic because it's purely like monounsaturated fats, a lot of fiber, which we all need. So things like that, just sort of tiptoeing and incorporating that into your diet are really, really good, easy swaps. So do you want to make some nut milk with me?
We do, but I'm going to ask one more question from
Okay.
John, and that is avocado oil. Why would I use that and when?
Yes, so extra virgin olive oil you can use for probably 95% of your cooking. But if you're going to cook something at a very high heat, like you're going to sear it in a pan or fry it, then you do need an oil with a higher smoke point.
Mhm.
Avocado oil is a really good choice. Also, nut oils like pecan oil, I really like. They also have some polyphenols, not so much as olive oil, but they're very, very good fat composition and polyphenol composition oils. So all you really need in your kitchen is extra virgin olive oil, of which I have two types. I have high-end extra virgin olive oil that I don't even cook with. It's such good olive oil that I just want to drizzle it on food. I don't want to heat it up and damage polyphenols. I have supermarket everyday olive oil, which I use
Mhm.
for, and then I have one or two oils for high smoke point cooking. Avocado oil is wonderful because it's neutral flavored. It's good for Asian inspired dishes. We don't want that olive flavor or anything that you're using a high temperature cooking method. Okay, like say you're roasting, something in the oven at 425, like Brussels sprouts, and you like them really crispy and almost a little bit burnt. That would be a good oil to use for that.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Stop sharing your screen and we'll get to some cooking here. And the harvest date on the bottom of the olive oil. So is it a year?
Uh-huh.
What's the timing on that?
It varies by state. The best buy is, I think, 18 months to 2 years. When you buy a good bottle of olive oil or any bottle of olive oil that's extra virgin, you want to make sure that when you open it, you want to consume it within 6 months because the fats are perishable, the polyphenols are perishable. So 6 months. So, buy small quantities, buy small bottles if you're not using a lot in your kitchen. It's really always really people always want to go to Costco or some big box store and get like a big tin, which I use it because I have a cooking school and I
Yeah.
use those tins. Like, right, I go through them really quickly. But in your own home, if you're cooking for one or two people, you may not need, a big tin of olive oil. Buy a smaller bottle because it's perishable. You don't want it to be exposed to air. You want to keep it away from the stove. You want to keep it out of the sunlight. You want to keep it in a cold cupboard. And that is how you'll preserve all of its goodness.
Fabulous. Let's do some cooking.
Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna skip ahead. I do have a couple more slides, but they're recipe slides. The first thing we're going to do is when I was doing these recipes for my book, I used a lot of cashews in my cooking, sort of like the backbone of brain healthy eating, because they have these satiating healthy fats and they have a fairly neutral flavor, but they're also a little bit sweet, so you can actually make like a dessert topping out of cashews. So I'm a big fan of the cashew. And normally, when you make cashew milk, you take cashews, you soak them in water for a couple hours, and then you drain off that water, and then you put the soaked cashews in a blender with a little bit of salt and water, and then vanilla or a sweetener if you want. Like I like to use whole dates. Um, so when you make cashew cream, which is sort of a whipped topping, what you see in this recipe, this is black bean soup with cashew lime crema. It's my nut-based variation on sour cream. Sour cream is one of those processed dairy products that we should probably limit or avoid. But cashew lime crema is absolutely delicious. It's one of the most delicious things. So when you make cashew cream, it's the same recipe as making milk, just less water. Okay. And I have a shortcut. This is what I figured out when I was doing recipe testing because I was going through all my cashews and I was always forgetting to soak them. So I call this almost instant because what I'm going to do is going to take a cup and a half of cashews and put it in a small pot on the stove. I don't know if you can see. And I'm going to cover these with water, just tap water. Now, instead of soaking for hours, I'm going to bring this to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, I'm going to turn off the heat and keep it covered for 5 minutes. And it gets in the exact same consistency that I used to just would soak overnight or soak for hours. So it really makes it more impromptu when you want to make one of these recipes. You don't have to plan ahead so much. And also boiling the cashews gets rid of some of the impurities And especially if you're not using organic all the time, I don't always buy organic nuts. It really starts to add up.
Mhm.
So, and cashews have like a really hard shell too, so they're a little bit protected like almonds. So boiling it kind of, gets rid of the impurities or anything that could be sticking to the almonds or the cashews. So we're gonna put these on to boil, and I'm gonna show you the, can I go back? Why is my computer not going back? Oh, there we go.
Um,
There we go. We're gonna do the
I,
vanilla cashew milk.
I have made that cashew crema, and maybe I'm nuts, but oh, that's funny. But no, you also with my tacos, I did the cashew crema and then added roasted a jar of roasted red bell peppers, correct?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go through a couple variations we can do on the cashew cream. And the red pepper cashew cream sauce is the one that goes really well with the cauliflower tacos or basically any taco. It's also a nice sauce for fish and things like that. So in my blender, I've got my cashews. I'm going to add some water.
Annie, I also used that red pepper sauce that I made and put it on toast. It was absolutely so delicious.
The red pepper sauce has so many things you can do with it. So I've got about 4 cups of water, 1.5 cups of cashews. Now, when you buy nut milk at the grocery store, it probably only has like maybe 3 or 4 nuts in the whole carton. Okay. So when I'm making it home, I'm making it, it's going to be thicker, it's going to be creamier, more flavorful. You can certainly water it down if you want to. And, but it's basically a serving of nuts is the way I design it. It's not like buying the store-bought ones is bad. There's some really good products out there. There's a couple that I really like and I buy sometimes too. This is something I usually just make from scratch because it's easy. And I'm going to add a whole date. This is a medjool date. Make sure there's no pit. Throw that in there. And I'm also going to add, because I'm going to use this for my lattes tomorrow, my matcha lattes. I'm going to add a little bit of pure vanilla extract. And this all goes in the blender. And this is going to be blended. If you have a powerful blender, it takes about a minute. If you have another one that's, a good blender, but not super powerful, like say a NutriBullet, it might take a little bit longer. And are you ready? Do you want to mute me?
Annie's going to be muted, but I'm not. I just wanted to just share with the audience a quick minute that I met Annie Fenn because we had the same journey together. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and her mother. And we both really felt that the educational value of what she had to offer was so important for everyone out there. I don't care if you have Alzheimer's in your family or whatever, but we all live in one body and we all have a heart and a head. And so it's really important to adhere as much as we can to a brain healthy diet. The other thing is her recipes are easy. I'm very much into simplicity. Okay, Annie, you're back.
Okay. That noise is pretty loud. It's how I used to wake up my kids when they were in high school. Instant cashew milk. I don't know if you can see how frothy that is. I'm going to pour it into jar. Now this, if you leave out the vanilla and the date, you just have like a basic milk that you can use in cooking. You can use it, splash it on your oatmeal. You can certainly make a matcha latte. You can put it in your coffee, things like that. It's it's absolutely delicious. It's a little bit thicker and creamier than you would get at the grocery store. It smells like fresh nuts. It's like a delicious thing in and of its own. Now I'll make a quart of this probably every 2 or 3 days. It's just my husband and me now. So we'll go through this in about 2 or 3 days. And it is perishable. It doesn't last. The nut milks and all the plant milks that you buy at the grocery store are they last forever because they have all these binders and things to preserve them, preservatives, binders. And if you look at the ingredient list on a lot of these plant-based milks, there are things in there that I really don't love people to be consuming all the time. like the binders, we have been found to interrupt the gut microbiome, and keeping a healthy gut is important for a healthy brain. A lot of them have added sugar. A lot of them had added sodium or flavorings. So you definitely read the label. If you want to get cashew or almond milk at the store, it should be ingredient list should be almonds, water, and maybe salt, and that's it. Now, when you buy a product like that, or if you make it at home, it separates because it doesn't, all those binders are designed to make it like look and feel like cow's milk, which we all grew up with. So the only thing is when you pull this out of the fridge after a couple hours, it separates and it doesn't look that great. You just shake it up. So make sure you put it in a jar that you can
Hmm.
shake. Okay. That's all you need to know. And that is my milk for the rest of the week. And I am going to I'm just going to use the same blender to make the cashew cream. I've got my cashews boiled and steaming. Mm, it's really good. It's really good. It's like, mm, I put a lot of vanilla in it. It's really good. Like a vanilla milkshake, but not sweet.
Will you think about this last question that we have time for today? And it was submitted at registration about solo aging and living alone. And do you have any tips for cooking for one? Like I was thinking about that cashew milk. Like how
Uh-huh.
long would that really last? And would you want to maybe half recipes or what are your thoughts on cooking for just one and the whole solo aging challenge?
I totally get it. It's when you're trying to eat a really brain healthy diet or heart healthy diet, there is a little bit of planning and tension that goes into your shopping and your cooking. And you don't have to cook everything from scratch. Sometimes it has to do with just shopping with and finding the right ingredients, gathering the right ingredients, and then maybe just you don't even have to like cook some things like this recipe on the cover of my book, the salmon salad with basil and lime, that's basically can be assembled. This is something you barely even don't have to cook. You can get everything at the grocery store and then just put it together. So I think thinking of assembling rather than
Mhm.
cooking is a good way to go when you're cooking for one. And also when you do cook, make things that can be not really leftovers, but meal overs, things that you plan to have for meals later. Okay. So maybe you only have like maybe 3 lattes a week, then you probably would make a half batch of this, and that's totally fine. Okay. You can also freeze it. Let's say you make walnut parm, throw the rest in the freezer. You have a little bit for your avocado toast or whatever it is you're going to eat that way. You can put the rest in the freezer. And then when you have all these like nutrient dense ingredients that you really love that are delicious, then you can create simple meals with really no effort at all. So what I have right here is the cashews. They've been boiled and they're going into the blender. So like I said, it's the same as making nut milk, but you're using less water. 1 cup of water, pinch of salt. This is basic cashew cream. And I'm going to do something kind of fun with this one. If you make basic cashew cream, you can use it savory or sweet, right? You could add, say, maple syrup to it and have it be a dessert topping, like a little bit of maple syrup and vanilla. That's really good with that olive oil cake you were talking about before. If you want it to be savory, let's say that you want to get rid of the mayonnaise in your house, because I told you that's a saturated fat that is ripe for swapping out. Then you can make your own mayonnaise by using the basic recipe, adding a little bit of garlic, maybe throw a garlic clove in with the cashews when you're on
Mm.
them. And then maybe you throw a handful of basil. You make a basil garlic aioli from it. And you can put that on your sandwiches. You can toss that with pasta or rice. You can put that on vegetables. Um, and if you want to make the cashew lime crema, the one on that black bean soup, which is sort of my sour cream alternative, you would add a little bit of apple cider vinegar for that tang and then some fresh lime juice. And it's
Mhm.
absolutely delicious. It's absolutely delicious. You can drizzle that on nachos. I have a really healthy recipe for nachos. It's so good. And I do use chips, but the toppings are super healthy. But the cashew lime crema really makes it. It's great on soup. It's great on fish. It's great on other things. What I'm going to do is something, I'm just kind of thinking about the holidays since it's fall here where I live. I'm going to make tahini maple cashew cream. And tahini maple cashew cream is something I really love having. around the holidays because it's like a dessert cream that you can use as the basis for a pie or a tart, like an apple tart or a pear tart. Or you can just serve it with apple slices for a really easy dessert or even a snack. And I'm going to add a little bit of tahini. And this is something that somebody gave me. It's a tahini spoon.
Oh,
Isn't that cool?
it always, you never can get it off the spoon. You need two instruments to get it off the
No, no,
spoon.
no, no. Check this out. I don't know if you can see it.
It's like honey.
It's like a honey. It's like a little cage
Oh, that's great.
that makes the tahini smooth. And tahini is a seed, right? It's a sesame seed paste, very high in those monounsaturated fats, very good for you. And this, I'm gonna add a little vanilla. It's gonna be our maple tahini cashew cream. Okay.
And before you hit the blender, share with the audience where your retreats are.
Oh, so I've been taking people on educational vacations since 2015. I started by going to Mexico at Rancho La Puerta and teaching at their cooking school. Now I've branched out to take people to blue zones, which are places usually in Italy, but also Costa Rica, where people tend to live a really long time. And we're there as tourists, but also just to learn from the people, learn about the food, learn about their ways of life. So I have next month, I'll have two retreats in Sicily, the island off the tip of Italy. And I have one in Palermo and one in Ortigia. We have 12 people in each group. And while we're there, we're going to an olive oil farm. We're going to go to a sesame seed farm. You see where sesame seeds come from. We'll be doing some wine tasting around Mount Etna. We're basically visiting farmers and the people that make the food. We'll be doing a cooking class with some local chefs. And the whole time we're talking about brain health, and I'm just sharing all the things that I think are important for cultivating a brain healthy life. Next spring, I have a retreat in Puglia. Puglia is the skinny heel of the boot. It's a beautiful, incredible place, especially if you like rustic Italian food. And that is a yoga focused retreat. And then in
Mhm.
May of 25, I'm going to Sardinia, which is an island off the west coast of Italy. It's famous for a dozen or so towns that are blue zones. And we're going to be visiting centenarians, people that live over to be over 100, and learning about the food there. And then I have a tropical one too for the middle of winter. If you want to get away for 5 or 6 days, Costa Rica is also a blue zone. And I have a retreat there that is all plant-based and alcohol-free. It's in the middle of January, right after the holidays. So a really good reboot for anyone who has a really good Christmas or Hanukkah.
Well, I want to thank you so much, and I want to encourage everybody in the follow-up email to share with friends and family and to sign up. I believe Kensington has a special for you to sign up for your newsletter. I think it's such valuable information, and the recipes are so delicious. And
Oh, thank you.
your book you can buy on Amazon is filled with beautiful pictures and really delicious and easy recipes. It's not going to take you half a day to cook a meal. So,
I definitely
Annie
appreciate
Fenn.
how busy people are. Everyone is so busy. People are just struggling to get dinner on the table. And I was in the same shoes when I was working as a busy doctor with small children. So I have a lot of shortcuts. I have a lot of tricks, and I'm, being faithful to the brain healthy food groups. But my job is to make it delicious, easy, budget friendly, have you excited about it. And the newsletter community is something I would welcome everyone to join. There's a free tier. There's also a paid tier where you get a little bit more access to articles and recipes. And there's a founding member tier where I give you 4 live cooking classes a year. And being a member of the newsletter means you have access to me. You can ask me any question you want. I always get back to you. I really feel like it's a community and we're all in it together. And I learn from my newsletter subscribers just as much as they learn from me. So it's a wonderful place
Well,
to be.
so much research goes into that, especially the Dr. Orm study that you talked about, which is what this webinar is based on. What's good for your heart is good for your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah, we
So
went over
thank you.
Dr. Ornish's latest study, which I think is fascinating, plant-based food, looking at how it shapes cognitive function over time. Really fascinating research that everyone should know about.
Anyway, thank you. And thank you so much to our audience. And we look forward to doing a next webinar with you. And maybe I'll just join you in Costa Rica and we'll do it from there.
That would be the best. Thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for joining in. And if there's any other questions in the chat, I'll take a look at them as well.
Thank you so much. Have a
Okay.
great night or a great afternoon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.